Good morning. We start business this morning with general questions. Our first question from Emma Harper.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of its commitment in the programme for government to decarbonise the rail network, when the Dumfries and Stranraer lines, when will they be upgraded to reduce emissions and improve journey times?
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, last week this Government committed to putting plans in place to decarbonise Scotland's railway by 2035. Transport Scotland will set out details and actions in spring 2020. We also committed to identifying opportunities across the rural rail network in the South West, drawing on the successful approach adopted on the line north of Inverness to exploit the value of those lines for the benefit of local communities and the wider economy. That work will include the prospect of line speed improvements and the review of service patterns, and I expect this investigation to report by the autumn of 2020.
Emma Harper.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Constituents and businesses regularly contact me with their concerns and frustrations over the journey frequency and times on both of these arterial routes, and they feel that it acts as a barrier to attracting people and investment to Dumfries and Galloway. Can the Cabinet therefore provide me with assurances that the Government is committed to improving the Stranraer and Dumfries lines, both to improve passenger satisfaction and to reduce emissions on the diesel lines, particularly given the climate emergency rightfully declared by the Scottish Government?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, as we discussed the Rural Economy Committee just yesterday, this is an area where the Government has set out its ambition to decarbonise the rail network. Part of that will be further electrification, but we're also looking at alternative propulsion methods, including battery and also hydrogen cell. And we're in advanced discussions with a range of parties on looking at the prospect of bringing in such types of train systems into the Scottish network, which we'll be taking forward over the coming months. But I can give the member the assurance that she's looking for, that the work that we are commissioning to look at how improvements can be made, which should report by the autumn of next year, is to specifically address the very concerns that the member has raised on behalf of our constituents.
And Finlay Carson to be followed by Colin Smith. Finlay Carson.
In November last year, I raised the closure of the airline to Stranraer with the First Minister, asking if better contingency plans would be put in place to avoid disruption in the future. I was pleased that the First Minister took that undertaking to ensure no disruption in the future. Given that there are still ongoing works at the Air Hotel and with electrification now being mooted, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that those contingency measures are in place?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, Presiding Officer, as was mentioned at the time, Network Rail and through Transport Scotland put a considerable amount of effort into addressing the issues about the Air Station Hotel, which was causing an impact on the line. I know that the Council are also seeking to have action taken forward in relation to the condition of the hotel itself, but I can assure the member that there is ongoing work in looking at how we can continue to help to protect the line should anything unforeseen develop in the future. As you would expect, that's something that's always considered within the rail network. And as I mentioned to Emma Harper, a key part of what we're looking at is not just electrification, but also looking at alternative propulsion systems for trains, which includes the hydrogen cell and also battery trains, which allows us to then look at removing the diesel trains from the network. So these are all issues which are being looked at and will be part of the work which we'll continue to take forward as part of our decarbonisation of the rail network.
And Colin Smith.
Thank you, President Officer. Well, battery and hydrogen trains are better than diesel trains from an environmental point of view. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that the Nith Valley line from Glasgow to Dumfries through to Carlisle is actually an increasingly important line as a diversion from the West Coast main line, and therefore only investment in the track and electrification itself would actually allow those trains that use the West Coast main line to be diverted onto the Nith Valley line and run at speeds that they can currently run on the West Coast main line? Or we'll simply have the scenes that we had during the Beast from the East, where the Pendolino trains from the West Coast were crawling along the Nith Valley line because of the lack of investment in the track itself.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Presiding Officer, as I mentioned, the work that's now been undertaken by Network Rail to look at the improvements that can be made on the line will all form part of our thinking about what further investment will be made into this particular route, including looking at the potential for electrification or looking at alternative types of trains which can be used on it other than that of diesel trains. These are all matters that will be looked at. What I'm not going to do is jump to a conclusion as to what will come from that report, but I'm sure the member will welcome the very fact that we are looking at what further investment can be made into this particular route in order to help to improve journey times and also reliability on the route.
Question 2 has not been lodged. Question 3, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what it's doing to support Highlands and Islands businesses experiencing losses due to cuts in rural banking services.
Minister Kate Forbes.
Well, I certainly recognise the ongoing need for businesses in the Highlands and Islands to have access to banking services, particularly to withdraw and to deposit cash. The UK Government has legislative and regulatory responsibility for banking and financial services, and despite representations from the Scottish Government and from MPs and MSPs right across the political spectrum, the UK Government has made clear that it will not intervene in branch closure decisions. I have been continuing to engage with the banks and other stakeholders, pressing regulators, banking providers and the UK Government to ensure that local banking service, in particular access to cash, remains accessible.
Rhoda Grant.
Businesses that deal in cash are especially vulnerable because there appears to be an increase in break-ins surrounding those types of businesses. That's costing them financially, but it's also impacting on business confidence. I wonder what the Scottish Government is doing to protect and support these businesses that are vulnerable to break-ins.
Minister Kate Forbes.
The member raises a very good point and practical advice on how to develop business crime reduction and prevention strategies is carried out by the Scottish Business Resilience Centre, which has received grant funding from the Scottish Government. There's also work going on with the banks themselves, particularly through the Banking and Economy subgroup of FISAB, to ensure that between government and banks we give businesses the security that they need when it comes to dealing with cash.
Edward Mountain.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the Minister will be aware, there are currently no bank ATMs between Ullapool and Thurso. Can the Scottish Government confirm if they are in discussions, as I am, with banks to try and rectify this?
Minister.
I have been in discussions. I've had meetings with Link, for example, and the payment services regulator to look at how we ensure that there is that access to cash. And the member will be aware that there is a strategy in place just now to look at where an ATM does not have any other ATMs within a certain parameter, that ATM is preserved. But there's far more work that needs to be done, and I think working across parties to put pressure on the regulator and on the government itself is quite important.
Question number 4, John Mason.
To ask the Scottish Government when the guidance on the Scottish Housing Quality Standard will be reviewed.
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Everyone deserves to live in a warm, safe and affordable home. And for the social sector, the Scottish Housing Quality Standard is crucial to delivering that. I made a commitment to John Mason in May that any review of the guidance on the standards would consider the recommendation for 5-year electrical safety inspections, and I'm happy to reiterate that today. There's a range of activity currently already underway that will improve or has already improved the Scottish Housing Quality Standard on safety, fire safety and energy efficiency standards that are now being adopted by the social housing sector.
John Mason.
I thank the Minister very much for his tone and for answering that. I just wonder if he could be any more specific on the timing of a review of any guidance and when we might see a 5-yearly inspection brought into the social rented sector.
Presiding Officer, standards in different tenures have evolved separately over time, as Mr Mason is well aware. A review looking at improving consistency between tenures concluded with recommendations of the Common Housing Quality Standard Forum. And we've already started making some identified changes to the repairing standard. And we're also currently reviewing the tolerable standard, which applies to all housing in Scotland. The few changes that were recommended for the Scottish Housing Quality Standard included that requirement for 5-year electrical safety checks, which is already best practice within the sector. Any further changes to the SHQS will, I'm sure Mr Mason will understand, will be undertaken with close liaison with partners in the social rented sector, and that process itself will determine the timing of changes to the standard. But Mr Mason can be assured that I will continue to keep him in contact with him to let him know exactly how we're going to move forward in that front.
And Graham Simpson.
Thank you. Can the Minister tell us when this month he'll be responding to the recommendations of the Tenant Maintenance Working Group, and whether that will be in the form of a statement to Parliament or some other way?
Minister.
I cannot confirm how that will be related to Mr Simpson at this moment in time, but we will respond as we said that we would, and I'm happy to talk to Mr Mr Simpson about this after question time today about how we will move forward in that front.
And question number 5, Claire Baker.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what action was taken during the summer recess to secure contracts and future employment at BIFAB.
Cabinet Secretary Derek Mackay.
The Scottish Government continues to work collaboratively with BIFAB's majority stakeholder and shareholder DF Barnes in pursuit of a strong future pipeline of works for the company, with the aim to secure and deliver future contracts and increase employment opportunities. And Claire Baker was one of the members that was in attendance at a very helpful briefing I had with members with an interest in BIFAB.
Claire Baker.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. This Saturday in Kirkcaldy there will be a Fighting for Our Future march and rally with the BIFAB workforce, the local community, trade unions and supporters. The workforce and the people of Fife are throwing commitment and determination to bring jobs to Leavenmouth. It is important that all who have a stake in the future of BIFAB work together. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what preparations are in place for the next offshore wind supply chain summit and when that will be?
Secretary.
I think those are very helpful points, and I appreciate the efforts of all politicians to try and help the Government in pursuing work in that regard. We are proposing to take forward a range of actions that I discussed at the last summit, also to challenge the UK Government around contract for difference as well. There have been investment decisions that are welcome, but crucially we must secure some contracts that will lead to the positive benefits and expansion and growth for BIFAB. So there's a range of actions underway. I'm happy to provide a further briefing, but working very hard to secure contracts here and now. And I think it's an important point to make, Presiding Officer, that we mustn't confuse a campaign for work with poor industrial relations, because actually industrial relations are really strong with the workforce, with trade unions, with management, as we try and secure work for BIFAB yards.
Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an update further to his ongoing discussions with the UK Government as to when the UK Government will act to address the failings of its contract for difference process, where regrettably we see no conditionality, which would of course support indigenous supply chain companies such as BIFAB?
Annabel Ewing's absolutely correct to say if there was a change in CFD process, it would be materially significant to the outcome and the prospects of the UK and the Scottish supply chain, and that would be really important to BIFAB. UK Government could make that decision. They haven't made that decision. They are reviewing the CFD process. I don't have much more to offer at this time. We're trying to get progress from the UK Government in that regard, but they seem somewhat distracted on many other matters. But it is a matter of priority for this Government, could make a difference, and that's why we'll pursue a process that would allow conditionality, that would ensure work can and it will come to Scotland if the UK Government made that decision around contract for difference.
Alistair Allen.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was very pleased with the partnership BIFAB recently announced with Lewis Castle College, which will see new engineering training opportunities and work placements at Arnish. A complaint I often heard from workers at Arnish prior to the takeover by DF Barnes was that no training or apprenticeships were being offered, and this is an especially important issue given the older age profile of the workforce. So does the Minister agree that in order to keep the yard sustainable and to maximise local benefit, it is vitally important to ensure that young people have access to training opportunities such as these?
Cabinet Secretary.
I absolutely agree with Alistair Allen's comments there, that we want to secure that pipeline of work that will further enhance the job numbers and the opportunities for training apprenticeships within as well. I welcome that collaboration, and that's why we're focused on securing those contracts so that it can lead to further positive benefits for BIFAB and particularly Arnish and other sites who will benefit from those opportunities.
Question number 6, Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the potential impact on the egg production sector of a no-deal Brexit.
Cabinet Secretary Ferguson.
Presiding Officer, unfortunately, our assessment is that the egg production is another of our successful food and drink sectors that will be negatively impacted by a no-deal Brexit. And this is particularly true if, as expected, the UK Government leaves the sector without the protection of tariffs or quantitative restrictions on egg products coming into the UK. That would leave Scottish producers at an unfair disadvantage, with the potential for imported products of much lower quality and welfare standards flooding the market here.
Joan McAlpine.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and I have many concerns about this because I have a number of major egg producers in my South of Scotland region. Does he share the British Egg Industry Council's concern that a no-deal Brexit threatens the provenance of Scotland's egg production and the quality of the food we all eat because of the risk of eggs produced under much lower welfare standards entering our food chain? And can I ask what the Scottish Government is doing and what it can do to protect our producers and reputation for high welfare egg production?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I do. It beggars belief that the reckless approach by the UK Government to allow complete trade liberalisation in the egg production sector could wipe this out in one fell swoop. Not only will it leave our hard-working egg producers unprotected and vulnerable to cheaper imports, but could also lead to consumers unwittingly eating egg and egg products produced to a lower welfare standard than we do, thanks to being members of the EU. Now, these issues, to answer Ms McAlpine's question, these issues were raised with DEFRA ministers on Monday. But yet again, presiding officer, they were completely unable to give us any reassurance whatsoever to alleviate these real and practical concerns. It was completely inadequate and utterly shambolic.
Question number 7, Rhoda Mackay.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it plans to expand the HPV vaccination programme to include teenage boys and young men.
Minister Joe Fitzpatrick.
Boys in S1 will be offered the HPV vaccine from this academic year, 2019-20. Uptake for the HPV girls vaccination programme continues to exceed 80%, and we know from the evidence and the recommendations made by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation that extending the programme to include S1 boys will help reduce diagnosis of HPV-related cancers and save lives in years to come. The HPV vaccine has also been available to men who have sex with men up to age 45 through sexual health and HIV clinics since July 2017 in Scotland.
Rhoda Mackay.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary, thank the Minister for that very welcome answer. Last week, Teenage Cancer Trust launched their campaign Jabs for Lads, aimed at securing the vaccination for boys and young men. Can the Minister confirm if boys who have missed this due to their age will be offered the opportunity to get the vaccination?
Minister.
It is really important that everyone who's entitled to this vaccination take up the offer. And that's based on the evidence. So vaccination policy in Scotland, as with the rest of the UK, is based on the recommendations of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, the JCVI, an independent expert panel which provides evidence based on impartial advice on matters relating to vaccination. The JCVI has not recommended a catch-up programme for HPV boys programme. Should that change, of course, I would not hesitate to act and extend our programme. This is something that I take very seriously, and I'm very keen to make sure that we were not just not being advised because we hadn't asked the question. So the CMO wrote to the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation to seek their expert view on the policy of an HPV catch-up programme and the rationale. And They did not recommend. The argument for the girls' HP vaccination catch-up programme was that it's been highly successful, achieving such a high uptake in the girls' programme that it helps stop the spread of HPV to boys, and that's known as herd immunity. Clearly, there's a group of young boys out there who would not be protected by herd immunity from girls and women, and that is men who have sex with men, which is why I would encourage anybody in that category to make sure that they get their vaccination.
Question 8, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to regulate the use of private residential property for short-term lets.
Minister Kevin Stewart.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is committed to working with local authorities, communities and business interests to ensure that local authorities have the appropriate regulatory powers to balance the needs and concerns of their communities with wider economic and tourism interests. Our consultation on the regulation of short-term lets closed on the 23rd of July, attracting over 1,000 responses. And we are currently considering those responses and will announce our plans later this year.
Daniel Johnson.
I'd thank the Minister for that response. And while I note the consultation over the summer, the only mention in the programme for government was the setting up of a working group. So I'd ask the Minister if he'd agree with Kate Campbell, the SNP convener for Housing and the Economy and City of Edinburgh Council, when she says about short-term lets that we are absolutely clear we need a licensing regime because it would mean that we could set local policies that address the particular challenges we face in Edinburgh. Surely it's right that we regulate the commercial use of residential property.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I indicated in my initial answer, we've had over 1,000 responses which we will have to analyse and look at very carefully before we decide how to move forward, and also take cognizance of different circumstances in different parts of the country. As well as the analysis which is underway, the Government has also commissioned research to explore the positive and negative impacts of short-term lets on communities with a focus on neighbourhoods and housing. And that research involves short-term let hosts, residents, local businesses and community actors across 5 places in Scotland: Edinburgh, the East Neuk of Fife, Fort William, Glasgow and Skye. And a report on that research will also be published before the end of the year. We must get this right, we must listen to all, and we should not rashly move forward without taking cognizance of all of the responses that we have had back.
Thank you very much. And that concludes general questions.